Den har begynt. Oh. Okay, what's the best? Okay, if we talk prediction, we talk usually models, whether someone chooses to walk, drive, or whatever. We talk traffic flows on network and on links, usually associated with people walking more, cycling more, higher physical activity, or monetary issues as well, economy, and so on. Transport models, they model this: main arteries, car streets, cars. That's what they do. They do not work very well for cycling or walking. Why? Cyclists, pedestrians can use this can use shortcuts, boulevards, shopping streets. So we need something that captures mobility on those streets. The transport model doesn't do this. So there's another challenge to modeling active mobility. When we look at route choice, modeling flows, pedestrians, cyclists do not just minimize distance. We like to have shortcuts, direct routes, especially cyclists. They don't like to slow down. They don't like to take curves. So we need something that captures that too. So how do we model flows and behavior in the streets? Well, betweenness. It's defined as the sum of shortest path from everywhere to everywhere that passed through a link. Every street's origin is a destination. This is a cycling model, and it shows the most used routes, theoretically, in the network of Trondheim, or where people ideally should cycle. This isn't just a mathematical exercise. It is based on an assumption that the number of streets reached through the network is a proxy for the number of origins and destinations. The more network you have, the more travel demand there is, the more stuff is going on. So we can use this for several things, model flows, but we can also look where's conflict points between cars and cyclists. A lot of cyclists, a lot of cars on the same street is not a good thing. We can use it to prioritize cycling network gaps. A lot of cyclists and no infrastructure, not a good thing. We can also use it for pedestrian flows. There's a pedestrian model of Midtbyen and Backlandet. And in yellow are the theoretically most used streets in the center, usually associated with increased land use for commercial purposes, more active streets. The question is now, does this work? Well, we did a study recently correlating counts, volumes, pedestrian volumes, with a betweenness measure, a pedestrian model. I spare you the parameters. But we can see that the correlation is quite good. On the left side is the counts, down here is the betweenness measure, pretty good correlation. And yes, we can predict flows fairly well in the center of Trondheim. We also found in the study that the number of flows, people, pedestrians, cyclists, fellow classmates on the way to school is very positively associated with walking or cycling in school. Not in Trondheim, but in the smallest towns. However, safety by numbers, meeting other people, socializing is important for active mobility. So when we talk prediction, we also usually talk investments. Infrastructure investments. Again, it's about making people cycle more, walk more, but it's certainly about money because infrastructure costs. So there's always the question, well, is it worth it? So let's look at a concrete example. You mentioned bridges already. Let's look at a bridge. So there is a proposal to put up a new bridge connecting Byåsen with Tempe. Tempe will see densification. We know it. We talked about it earlier today. Tempe will become important. So let's connect this. Does this make sense? I'm not going to give the answer, but how would we go about it to assess this? Betweenness is one way. Another way is just purely looking at accessibility. This is the situation right now. Which buildings you can reach from Tempe within 3 kilometers. It's typical cycling distance. Tempe is here. Sorry, I forgot to put it in. But you can see on the left side of the river, there isn't very much you can reach from Tempe right now. Well, it's put in a bridge, boom. So now there's more buildings that you can reach, and likewise, more people in Byåsen would reach Tempe on bike. This is modeled on a cycling network. So, yeah, and you can see also a lot of more people would reach it. Great. This is accessibility. It's a very simple way to look at it. But let's look at flows. What would happen with the network flows? Again, here's our cycling model. It's the same as before. We see that this bridge here is being used quite a bit. It's a direct connection. I think this corresponds to reality quite well. So whoever needs to go from one side to the other probably needs to use this bridge, at least on a bike. So let's put the bridge in. Now we can see that there is flows over that bridge. It would certainly be used. But the beauty of network analysis is also you can see what happens not just on the bridge, but in the rest of the network. So let's see where the flows would increase. Not just on the bridge, but elsewhere. So here we can see, this is as a model, but we can see that the effect of the bridge on flows through the network would extend past the bridge on the right side, left side. And there's a lot more links that would see an increase in flows. You can use different models, but they all tell you more or less the same thing. There are links that are going to see an increase. And I recently just worked on this to calculate the increase of the probability to cycle as opposed to taking another mode of transport. This is preliminary, but there's the areas of Trondheim that for a trip to Tempe would have an increased probability of cycle as opposed to using any other form of transport. So we can see there are several areas. Well, this was a very brief introduction, a dense introduction to betweenness measure to model walking and cycling, very important measures for modes of transport for the city. It's not just for vitality and for activity, but generally for the attractiveness of the city and of course for the climate as well. Thank you very much.